There's a great song by the Lumineers, and the line is, the opposite of love is indifference. It's not that people hate you, it's that they just don't care. And if someone's complaining to you on your team, at least they still care enough to voice what is challenging them. And something that for them might be insurmountable for you as the leader could be a process change, could be a tweak, could be giving them different work for a few weeks so that they get to recharge.
Welcome to the Team Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Byron Summerdahl. Here you'll be inspired by industry leaders who build flourishing tech teams. Stay tuned and prepare to be amplified.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, I'm here with Jeremy Wright, who is a developer and architect turned tech leader. So he's actually really close to my heart. That's part of my journey too. He also is an expert in communication and is bilingual, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So bilingual is also something that's close to my heart because I know firsthand the kinds of doors that has opened and the kinds of ways that has made me just a better communicator in general. We're going to talk with Jeremy today about helping our teams to have a voice by giving them space to complain. I know some tech leaders might be looking for the stop button or whatever, because tech leaders do not always like to get complaints. But trust me, you're going to want to stay tuned today because we're not just talking about like letting people get together and commiserate. We're looking for a way to give people a voice so that they can flourish, so that we can actually make real changes in our teams and our organizations. Active listening and in giving people a way to and permission to complain is going to make a big impact in your team. Hey, Jeremy, tell me a little bit about yourself and tell our audience what you're up to these days.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy. I'm an engineer, a programmer, a team leader. I have a small consultancy, and I'm currently working in AI technology, trying to build a new way to engage with the types of messages that people are, reimagining how spam works so that you receive the messages that are really only meaningful to you.
I could use that product. So can I be a beta tester? Are you?
Perhaps. We're pretty early. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just the other founder and I that are trying to come up with a new way to imagine what a spam filter looks like.
I have thought about something like that before, and I stopped myself, luckily, from building it because it's not really what I should be working on right now. But I was tempted to start building something that would use AI to analyze the contents of the email and different characteristics, figure out and be able to train the other side. My preference is my configuration, be able to train that and say, okay, this is what I consider a valid attempt at my attention. These are the things that I actually do care about, just in case something might be marked as spam. So kudos. I can't wait to try it out. Somebody needs to do that, whether it's me or whether it's you. Probably better if it's you, because I got too many things going on already. So thank you for working on that.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jeremy, what book have you been reading lately that has made an impact on you?
I read a lot. The public library is an incredible gift. I just finished Growth Levers by Matt Lerner, and that book is fantastic, especially if you're looking at building and launching new products, or even if you're in an existing established organization and you need to find ways to add new features or new functions and determine. And I think that startup mindset exists in established companies and in new companies. You always need to be thinking about what those next features are. Do they deliver value to the customer? Because that's really what it's all about. It doesn't matter about what your database is or what your AI model is. It matters if you're delivering a solution and reducing friction for your people. And Growth Levers is a very practical book. You can burn through it. And I always listen to my audiobooks at 80% so that it's slow enough to grab the information. And you can burn through it in a couple of days and get a lot of fantastic value of practical ways to run the experiments, ways to measure those experiments and determine, should I do the investment for this project or feature? Should I not? Should I tweak it? Should I not? And how to determine when it's time to pour in the money and pull the people in, and when it's time to stop.
Yeah. Man, that's good. I'm going to add that to my Amazon list right after we get off the call. Jeremy, you've been in the industry for a while. You've done quite a bit. You've had a lot of hats, and I'm sure you've had plenty of opportunities to make mistakes. Always want to make sure that everybody realizes just how human we are on this podcast. We're just a bunch of old engineers trying to make a difference in people's lives and help them to flourish. But before we move on, I just want to set everybody's expectations. So step into my confession booth. Jeremy, it's time for confession time. What's an embarrassing mistake that you've made as a tech leader?
Oh, so many. So part of one that particularly stands out, someone came in from vacation, like a week and a half vacation. It was this big vacation he'd been planning with his family. I'm bilingual, so I know American Sign Language. And in American Sign Language, all of your grammar and vocal inflection and tone is carried in body language. So it's all in your shoulders. And what that does is it makes you an expert in reading body language, because people emote body language all the time, whether they're aware of it or not. And if you know how to read it, the challenge is recognizing when someone is doing it intentionally, like a deaf person, a signer, like speaking with their body, and when they're unintentionally doing it.
Yeah.
And so this person came in from their vacation. His family also works at the same business. So there were people there that were also at the vacation with him. And he was like, yeah, I just got back from vacation. I had a great time. But his body was just like, no, like it was just a horrible, like dramatic mess. And I was like, oh no, what happened? Completely like didn't hear the words and just responded to him. And he was like, no, like it was good. And everyone was like having these glances like, well, what did happen at your vacation? And
probably thinking, what's with Jeremy? He said it was a great one. And Jeremy's saying, oh no.
And so it's that double-edged sword of listening to people but also recognizing what you're hearing and what they're trying to tell you.
You know, if we had telepathy, we'd be kind of in the same boat, and it's kind of a similar responsibility and maybe opportunity for embarrassing mistakes, because if you can actually hear what people are thinking behind the words that they're saying, then
yeah,
might be a similar situation. You got telepathy, man. Did you know that?
I wish it was stronger with my wife. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's also probably one of those things that you've got to be careful not to use on people that know you've got the ability. Like,
yeah,
if I know that about you, Jeremy, if I'm sitting in the room with you, I might have to be like, okay, Byron, keep my shoulders here, keep my hands here. Don't let Jeremy see straight through me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thesis of the episode today is that tech leaders can help their teams to flourish by giving them space to complain. And that's a rough one, because, you know, a lot of times we tech leaders, we don't want to give people space to complain, because basically they're telling us that our baby is ugly. You know, all these things that we've built, these structures and processes that we've built to help people to thrive in their jobs and to be efficient and productive, we like those things. We spent our time and blood, sweat, and tears building these things. And then if we invite people to complain, it's almost like we're asking people to come and take a pickaxe and start picking away at our structures. So I think it takes some courage to do this, don't you?
I've never thought about it in terms of courage. It was always just trying to uncover what the real truth was, and that hearing truth can be emotionally devastating at times. The ugly baby concept, absolutely. But worse than that is no one telling you things that could easily be resolved because they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
There's a great song by the Lumineers, and the line is, the opposite of love is indifference. It's not that people hate you, it's that they just don't care. And if someone's complaining to you on your team, at least they still care enough to voice what is challenging them, and something that for them might be insurmountable for you as the leader could be a process change, could be a tweak, could be giving them different work for a few weeks so that they get to recharge. Sometimes the effort to resolve a complaint is straightforward. And you only need to do that a couple times before the floodgates start opening of, oh, I'm just going to give my leader, my supervisor, everything I can, and we'll see what we can do together. And it creates a very collaborative way to lead a team. It's kind of the mechanics of being a servant leader.
Yeah.
Here, do what you can and then give feedback of, okay, we can make this change now. We cannot make this change now. Here's what we're doing. This is going to take more time. But it all starts with understanding where the frictions are. And as you step back from the keyboard more, you're not in those conversations anymore. You're not seeing the code. You're not seeing all of the comments in Slack or in code review. And so you need some channel that's reliable that comes back to you to give you those things that you can do to affect change. Or double down on the things that are working. Yeah. Sometimes you hear complaints of like, oh, we have to do this now. And it's like, yes, and it's generating incredible value. And if you can explain that to them, then it can recast how they feel about some challenges that are on their team that they perceived as being annoying. But when they see the greater picture, you're actually growing them to then have a greater leadership impact at their own level. Yeah.
You mentioned servant leader, and I think that's a lot of what I think we want to become as leaders is not just a piece of management, not just a supervisor, but a servant who is leading and making the path straight for our collaborators so that they can do great work. Which actually leads me to something that I want to get mentioned and then get past so that we can talk about something more interesting, which is obviously one benefit to giving people a chance to voice their complaints, giving them space to complain, is that we will find parts of our process, our structures that are not working like we thought they would. We can tweak them, and then we will be able to pull levers and improve productivity, improve revenue, improve the bottom line. So that's an obvious benefit. Yes, everybody should be hoping for those kinds of side effects. And so that's not exactly what this podcast is about. Although those things are great, this podcast and what we could talk about for the rest of the time is the effect that it has on the people, because we're all about on this podcast about helping the people to flourish, not just because of a bottom line or productivity, but because of the goodness of helping people to flourish. Tell me this, answer this question for me. What does giving space to complain have to do with human flourishing?
Because it gives them a voice to their own purpose. People want their work to have meaning, and they want to do something useful and have purpose. And if you give them a voice, an agency in that process, then they're able to be more emotionally engaged with whatever it is they're working on. And when you have emotionally engaged people, they show up for meetings, they're present. They don't just rubber stamp their code reviews. Your defect rate goes down. So all of these primary objectives for leaders are secondary impacts of just giving people emotional ownership of and purpose for the thing that they're building.
Yeah. Now, I can give people a voice, and I have in the past, by giving them a survey or giving them a simple NPS question based on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely are you to recommend working for me to your family and friends? And I can do surveys like that to gather that feedback. There's something different about what you were talking to me about earlier about the manager supervisor. You were telling me a story. I want you to tell that story again to me. About the manager supervisor that held up a sign that said time to complain.
Yeah.
That's different than just giving out a cold survey. So what's the deal there?
I got this technique from one of my direct reports, and then I turned it around and started using it, and it's fantastically effective. So I have a little piece of notebook paper because I'm typically a remote employee. And so all of the people I work with are remote. And so how do you use that to your advantage? One, I don't do this in a group. You only do this one-on-one. You don't give a group of people time to complain. because then it just doesn't work. But when you're in your one-on-ones, you have a set time somewhere, and I have a little piece of notebook paper, and you just, and the key is that it's poorly written, like it's just scribbled, and you just slowly raise it into the frame that says time to complain. And it's this lighthearted, like giggly, like, oh, that's really funny. And they almost think you're not serious, and they just like start telling you stories, and then you find out what's really going on. Because you up front said time to complain, you've also reserved the right to say, okay, we need to put that away and get back to business. And so you can draw the line, you can safely say, okay, we need to stop now and get back to, what are the things we need to be focusing on this week? And you can get back to the more formal kind of one-on-one like questions. But when you have this little lighthearted time to complain, you get this little giggle, they tell you some stories, and then you get back to business, and then you have this deep spectrum of what do you need to go chat, what do you need to go focus on for the next week or 2 weeks or whatever your one-on-one cadence is.
I think that there is, of course, opportunity to go back to your processes and your structures to look at what needs to be tweaked. But I'll bet in those discussions where you held up the sign and people kind of let their guard down, people may also start to complain about their coworkers, about things that they're just annoying to them and that are not necessarily like businessy, processy kinds of things. It helps them to voice their complaints about even things that are maybe frivolous. And I'll
100%.
bet that opens up the door for you to start coaching them too, which would help them to flourish.
100%. Yeah. Sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing. So sometimes they're complaining about a coworker and you just sit there and listen to them, and that's all they need. They're in their inner mind loop. They say that you speak externally at like 100 words a minute, but you speak internally to yourself at like 1,000 words a minute. So your inner dialogue can like go down these rabbit holes so much faster. And if someone just says some things out loud, they might just need to get it off their chest, and then it's fine. People have frictions with each other. That's actually what makes a good quality team. That's the definition, or it's one of the effects of good diversity on a team, is different ideas that create friction that drive something to better quality.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that you just listen. They said what they had to say in a safe space, and then it's over. If it comes out again, then you have that space for coaching, and you can say, well, is there an experience gap? Can you help them, or can you help them understand why their work is actually creating more friction for you? I can mediate that conversation, or do you want to just go talk to them yourself? Frequently, too, I have multiple languages on my teams. I tend to work with international people, and there will just be cultural differences. There's a directness from some parts of the world that are perceived as aggressive and rude in other parts of the world. And it's a matter of, that's their culture. He was being kind by being clear to you, because clearness is kind. And he's like, well, he could have just softened it a little bit. And then there's a coaching on both sides of, an American hears those words this way. Eastern European person might hear these words this another way. Our soft language comes off as we're not really confident about what we're saying. Understanding how culture influences the words you're saying and how they're heard also affect that coaching ability, and then making the teams more cohesive together.
Yeah. In my inner ear, in my inner mind, I'm hearing somebody, maybe it's me from a past experience. I'm just hearing somebody, a tech leader out there saying, okay, I'm a technology leader. I'm trying to help my company to succeed, to build this product. We've got quotas to meet. We've got KPIs that are screaming in our faces. I don't have time to be a therapist because it feels like this is going to turn into a bunch of therapy sessions. So tell me about that. Like, help our audience realize that this is not something that is just going to turn into a bunch of therapy sessions. It is something that is going to turn into human flourishing and will help your bottom line. It just takes some tweaks so that it doesn't turn into
Yeah.
just endless therapy.
One of it I touched on already, because you have the little sign and you declare it is now time to complain. You can now declare it is time is over. You're already spending this time in your one-on-ones. So you're already doing it. I'm just proposing perhaps the questions you're asking aren't opening themselves up to the frankness and the honesty that you might actually be wanting.
Mm-hmm.
You might be asking questions like, and if you read tech leader books, of which there are several good ones, they have a list of questions and it'll be like, what can we do this week that will help something be more effective? Or what has something you've done recently? Or tell me a challenge that you've experienced. And all of those come off as, I'm an individual contributor. I want to impress my boss with what I'm doing so that I do well in quarterly reviews, or I'm perceived as being a good team leader so that I get more opportunity. I don't want to be the complainer. I don't want to be the person that brings negativity. And so you end up getting these hedged answers.
Yeah.
And so if you just have your little moment of time to complain, it can be 90 seconds, it can be 2 minutes. You're already spending that time in your one-on-ones, and you just are recasting. You're taking the word complain, which is always bad and always negative, and making it silly. Then you're getting this like, oh yeah, this other day, like something happened. And sometimes you end up hearing things about something that's bothering them at home or something that's bothering them in their personal life. As long as it doesn't cross like a boundary, just being engaged with the people that report to you also increases cohesion in your team. Mm-hmm. For a period of time, I was supervising a team that was in an active war zone. And the things you'll hear about what their challenges are, I learned never say, I understand, because you almost can never understand another person's perspective. Just make them feel heard. Like, I'm listening. I heard you. Thank you for sharing that with me. But that phrase, I understand, especially cross-culturally, can come across as incredulous.
I agree. I often find myself even softening that. Like, I want to say I'm empathizing with you. I'm seeking a way to understand. And I'll often soften it just by saying, I think I kind of understand. I'm starting to understand. Tell me more. I want to hear, want to listen. And so that I can see how coming off and saying, okay, stop talking. I already understand. I understand what you're going through. We're the same. We're not. I mean, you're North American. I'm North American. I live in Latin America. You live in Arizona. I can't even begin to understand how hot it is where you live right now. I just have this impression. You can't imagine how it feels to be pulled over on the road just because somebody wants to get some money out of me. There are all kinds of things that we can't understand about each other, but we can listen.
We can listen and be present in that listening.
Yeah. So what do you think tech leaders often, like if somebody's saying, okay, I want to start doing this, what do you think people overlook when they're seeking feedback or challenges or complaints from their team?
If you're only feeling positive at the end of all of your one-on-ones, you're not getting the truth. You're like, wow, all of my direct reports are just having a great time and everything's good. Then that's just impossible. There's just no way, because you can't have a group of people working together closely for 40, 50, 60, however many hours a week, depending on the current environment that you're in, and expect everything to be fantastic all the time.
Yeah.
And so if you're leaving every one-on-one with like, great, I'm awesome, then you're not getting the truth.
Yeah, I agree. So do me a favor, share with me a time when giving people space to complain led to some unexpected outcomes.
Positive or negative or?
Well, surprise me, maybe both.
One of them was the understand. Like I mentioned, half my team was in an active war zone. And so there were bombings on their street during the night, and then they would report to work the next day. And I was a new leader at the time. I thought the best thing to do is like give them space. Okay, your work can be late. It's all right. But what I discovered was, and this kind of came up in time to complain, was, well, you're actually telling me that my work is not important. Like, if it can be late, then why did it have a deadline in the first place? So I've changed my tactic, especially when those external forces are creating a pressure on the professional work, to have high standards, but with grace. We need this done. It is important. But if it misses, give them the grace to be like, okay, what can we do we need to make an adjustment for you? Or no, it was just a really bad week. Personal things happened, and you give them the grace to maintain that high standard. And so that unexpected outcome was, hey, you told me I can get my work done on Monday instead of on Thursday, but I felt that you were just telling me my work's not important. An unexpected outcome positively was sometimes the best thing you can do is do nothing. Someone was complaining in a particular one-on-one with me, and as they were voicing just this jumble of words, like a lot of it was kind of just, you could tell they had an inner monologue for a long time. And then it just all came out, and they're like, oh, maybe I can just go ask them to do this instead of that, and it'll just, great. And then they ended the one-on-one because they were like so gung-ho on like going and fixing that little friction for themselves. And so I did nothing.
That's powerful. Sometimes the best solution is nothing. I like that. So, Jeremy, if there's one thing that tech leaders should do tomorrow to promote human flourishing in their teams, what would it be?
This came from a mentor of mine, and it was to give yourself a process to become a servant leader is to count the number of times you interrupt to provide a solution. And I think it's hardest for us who were individual contributors and grow into that leadership role because we were once measured on being the solution giver, and now we're measured on being the solution carrier, like carry those with the solution. And if you just simply count the number of times you interrupt and provide a solution, it's like that Atomic Habits book. It gives you that little trip where you're like, wait, you'll end up doing it less often, and you'll hear more of your own team offering solutions. And then that will grow them and allow them to be more independent and useful.
Yeah. You've probably heard of this too, but like if you want to improve something, measure it. Mm-hmm. So if you realize that interrupting people and bringing your own solution removes their autonomy, removes their control of the situation, and bringing your own solution, it just completely wrecks that. If you know that, counting the times that you interrupt people with it is a great way to reduce it. That's great.
Yeah. And I have a little paper notebook. I have a note card right here. And during the day, I just tally up. And then when I go to interrupt, I'm like, I'm going to have to tally this. Maybe I'm not going to say anything. So
you guys like a failure. Every time you have to like tally up, did it again. Hey, Jeremy, how can people connect with you?
I have a blog and a newsletter, quiescent.us. You can sign up there.
Awesome.
And I'm on LinkedIn.
All right, great. I'll provide those links in the show notes. Jeremy, this has been a great conversation. I can't wait to hear the feedback from our audience about the impact that this has made on their day-to-day, on their teams. I predict that through this episode, people will begin to flourish more on any teams where this is applied. So thank you so much for contributing to the happiness, well-being, contentment, joy of teams all over the place.
Thank you for the opportunity. I loved it.
This has been another episode of the Team Amplifier podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, get out there and be a team amplifier.